What does it take to build a 9-figure business?
It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of focus. There is no...
What has been the best part of involving your family in the business?
The best part has been I've been able to share and see them grow in their careers.
Most businesses don't make it past the first year. Then the next batch will not make it past year 5. You have been in business for over 15 years. What has been the key for you to stay in business this long?
That's a very good question.
It's crazy to me, but there are still businesses that are debating if they should make content online. What would you say to a founder, a business owner that is still not building a brand?
Unless you've got a business that's guaranteed your revenue.
What has been the worst part of having your family involved in the business?
It's sometimes a little bit harder to say.
Welcome to Founders Playbook podcast, the ultimate guide for entrepreneurs to build their empires, increase profits, and become great leaders. I'm your host, Nelson, founder and CEO of Vibes Creative, Australia's leading video podcast agency. Let's get down to business. Welcome back to another episode of Founders Playbook. As usual, today's guest is one of our legendary podcast partners, actually. He's a 9-figure entrepreneur and the managing director of Global Foodcare Group, a leading wholesale and distribution business that provides comfort and wellness products to medical professionals, retail businesses, and direct to consumer in multiple markets. His businesses collectively make over $30 million a year. Please welcome the legend, the incredible Jeff Coombridge.
Well, it's very kind of you, Nelson. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Let's just jump straight into it. Jeff, what does it take to build a 9-figure business?
It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of focus. There is no, if you're going to build a business, you have to be 100% in the business. That's incredibly important. It can't be a week job and then you forget it. It's 24/7. Obviously, you've got to balance your life, but at the same time, to be successful, you have to be 100% focused because there's no one looking over your shoulder going to fix up something. So that's really one of the most important lessons. And then obviously after that, it's about building good support, good people that can really help take the vision and execute what is the strategy that you set for the business.
We're definitely going to be diving into some of that in regarding team, but I'm curious to hear, and for everyone here that maybe has never heard of you, how does someone go from being an accountant to a 9-figure business owner?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you very much. You're right. I started my career as a chartered accountant, did a lot of accounting tasks, financial controller, CFO roles, and for large companies. So I spent the first probably 20 years of my career doing balance sheets, creating financial plans, budgets, working very closely with senior management, the CEO of businesses. So it certainly gave me an incredible grounding about what works, right? I think as an entrepreneur, I would never, ever, I think one of the most important aspects of being an entrepreneur is actually being able to very quickly assess the financial implications of what you do. All right. You don't have to think, and from my background, you don't have to think about what does it mean. You sort of got inherently, it's instinctive. Okay, that's going to be positive, that's going to be negative. So for a that was very good. Now, one of the biggest challenges with accountants, though, is sometimes it's hard to move from that very, very structured environment to be entrepreneurial. And for me too, it was quite a late sort of departure, I suppose, in my career, in that my first departure from accounting some 20 years ago was I got into a sales role. And that was a big culture shock, but at the end of the day, it was a very important part of the career because it taught me that you have to sell not only the product or the services you're selling, but you have to sell yourself. Often an accountant can be a bit backroom, whereas you produce the numbers and you don't have to sell yourself. But I think the most important lesson for me was that you had to sell your credibility. And if you're going to sell products and services to a consumer or a business, you have to be credible. I moved it was a sort of a natural move, but I moved into selling business software. So accounting software, which obviously, I had the background to do, but again, I had to sell the story, in terms of sometimes large investments that businesses would make in terms of ERP systems and all that. So that was a really good experience in terms of really developing that aspect of business. Probably later than I would have liked is when I really moved into owning my own business. And that was, I think, probably 15 years ago. It was my first go where I actually took ownership of a business. And I would say it was a bit, in hindsight, would have loved it to have been 10 years earlier, but at the same time, I got a really good grounding in that sales and that accounting background. And then moving into my own business is a whole set of other lessons that I'm happy to share with you during the experience.
So 15 years ago, how old were you when you started your first business?
About 45.
45.
Yeah.
Wow. And people feel like they're late if they haven't started a business in their 20s.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Hindsight, it would have been nice to have started at 35, 30, because I think it's important to get some good grounding. I think today a lot of people want to start straight away, is your point. I want to be Elon Musk in the first minute of my career. The reality is you miss out on a lot of really good experience and grounding if you do that. So I really do value all the experiences I had. But and later on, one of the things is that later on in your career, it's sometimes harder to move because you move from that sort of safety zone into the risk zone, and owning your own business carries with a lot of risk because suddenly you're responsible every month for the paycheck, for the staff, the salary, payroll and so forth like that. It's a big risk profile. But as soon as you move, you wouldn't go back. You would not go back to working for someone vis-a-vis creating your own destiny.
Absolutely. And I would say you can't go back if you're that person. If you truly are that guy or that person that has that entrepreneurial blood and wants to build something that is bigger than himself, it is impossible for you, once you get a taste of it, to want to go back. I've noticed that it also takes a very specific type of human that can be okay with all the risk and how scary it becomes to be your own boss, to have your own thing.
100%, because you don't get a playbook.
Absolutely.
I mean, the name of this playbook, you don't get a playbook when you're an entrepreneur. You have to create it. So
absolutely.
It's on you to create the direction.
Absolutely.
And you can always go in multiple directions, and some directions won't work, some will. So that's the pressure, that's the stress at the end of the day in terms of that. But at the same time, it's so engaging in terms of continually building something. It's not about the financial results. The financial results are a measure. It's about the building, the satisfaction of moving step, build. It's like building a house and building a tower of buildings. That's the real satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you have the playbook, because as an example, this is one of the things that we're aiming to do here with Founders Playbook is literally giving you all the real life experiences, tactics, and everything you need in order to kickstart your own business. Yeah. But even if you get that, even if you get a mentor, a coach, that I'm a big proponent that you should totally pay for someone that has already built the thing that you're trying to do, so that he can save you all the time, energy, and money and mistakes, right? So you can get there faster. But even then, you're going to have to go through a lot of pain. There's going to be scary moments. There's no way around that. Even if you get the playbook, if you get the coach, the mentor, it doesn't matter. It's going to be extremely difficult, probably the hardest thing you will ever do.
Well, a lot of things about coaches, and look, I'm a fan of that as well. And in fact, I think sometimes it's about just building your network, because sometimes you'll get coaching from an aspect that might not even cost you anything. It's a relationship.
Absolutely.
But you need to widen your network, and there's so many great opportunities to widen your network through places like LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, one of the best values is someone that says to you, look, that's not a good idea. It's the not that's sometimes the best advice.
Yes.
Because generally you have a lot of the ideas, and too many. I mean, people will sometimes accuse me of having 100 balls in the air, But it's that coaching of saying, helping you prioritise is an important aspect of your journey.
A mentor, but also the right team members, right?
Exactly.
The right people that will question your ideas, because
Exactly.
as an entrepreneur and business owner, you're always thinking in visionary mode. You're always
Exactly.
thinking of, how can we do this? How do we take it to the next level? Let's start also this brand because we're successful at this thing. Let's create a new offer, a new product, a new stuff.
Exactly.
But sometimes you need that people that are gonna question you and say, hey, wait, why are we doing this thing? We said we're gonna be the best at this one thing. We said that we're gonna accomplish this mission. How is this helping us with this?
Exactly.
Right? So having the right team and mentors around you so that they can keep you on track, because that's one of the hardest things. And you said this word already, which is by far the single thing that if you can fully dialed in, there's absolutely no chance of you failing, and it's focus.
It is focus. It's focus. And, with team members, you need to be able to execute your strategy. And you can't execute it yourself. At the end of the day, you rely, to be effective, you rely on your group, on your team, doing their bit in unison as a group. And it's a beautiful thing to watch when everyone is doing their bit to achieve a result. You need that sort of execution capability. But you need the people, as you say, to basically challenge and say this is not going to work or it's not the right direction. At the same time, as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to create, in a very motivating way, a little bit of encouragement, a bit of a lift up, because generally the common thing with team members is they're very conservative. They tend to be a bit conservative. Oh, no. And so you need to be the one that sort of lifts up the motivation or the goals a bit.
Yep.
And gives that bit of a higher objective.
Yes.
It's a real balance, because sometimes if you set a higher objective that's impossible to achieve, then you're going to cause a lot of demotivation.
Absolutely.
In the team.
Yeah. And the dreams of the founder and the leader has to be big enough to fit the dreams of everyone in the team in it, because then everyone will find a reason to want to be a part of the mission and to want to contribute, because their dreams get to become a reality within the dream of the company.
Exactly, 100%. A good example, and it's my family, a key part of the business, my 3 children and my wife. And my 3 children, who have spent a lot of their career in the business, the biggest challenge is to provide a motivating career for them and not just have them involved just because they need to be involved because they're part of the family business. I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm thinking about motivating, challenging opportunities that really do motivate and give them the aspirations. And that comes from having the bigger picture as a business, right? So that they can see that it's not, when we started, we'd be classed as a small to medium business, right? My kids have been through university, law and business and all that. So you want to make sure they've got an opportunity to really utilise those skills. And in a small to medium business, I was always thinking about how can we create a significant online business. So my son, who runs the digital business, has got something that's like, it's equivalent to major companies, but he's built that from nothing to be able to have something that you sit back and say, that's a major digital business. That's a really driver for me in terms of the business. And it's the same with any of the team members, is I really love the fact when they can get a drive and a satisfaction and really enjoy what they do. Because you spend a lot of time in your job, and you really want to make sure you're providing an environment where team members can enjoy what they do.
Absolutely. At what point did you decide to get your family involved with the business?
Pretty much when I started, it was more of a part-time thing. They're at university, my 2 older children, and they're at university, so it was a part-time job. Great, convenient. They can do some part-time digital work or, accounting and all that. But they're in at the start, and then they sort of were part of, helping grow the business. And as I say, that pathway, though, of making sure that they've got satisfying careers within the business has been an important motivator for me.
What has been the best part of involving your family in the business?
The best part has been, I've been able to share and see them grow in their careers. I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed watching them grow and learn and become skillful and really, it's really satisfying for me to share a big part of my family's life, because otherwise you go to work and you don't see your family, and then you come home and this way here, we've actually been able to share a lot of our life together around the business, which has been great.
What has been the worst part of having your family involved in the business?
It's sometimes a little bit harder to say, you're not doing a great job. But at the end of the day, you know, I think we're all pretty sensitized to it now, and we can be pretty, you know, arm's length in terms of being honest. You know, one of our values as a company, and we really want to, you know, stretch it across our whole culture, is honesty. I think that's an important value of our whole company, is being honest about performance and, you know, just any issues that come up.
Why do you say that sometimes has been a little bit challenging to give feedback?
It's just because it's the interpersonal. So sometimes the personal family gets melded into the business. Like if you've got a team that's not family involved, it's very much business. Right. Here's the goals, here's the objectives. This is on target, this is not on target. You know, we need to improve here. But sometimes when things get a little bit melded, that's the problem. That can be the difficulty with family, where it becomes all sort of a personal thing that's melded into a business thing.
For any founder or business owner that is involved or is thinking of getting his family involved in the business, what advice would you give?
Look, I think there's a couple of things that I live and breathe by. One is my family, their roles need to be very real and they need to contribute significantly to the business. I hold it to a higher standard than I do anyone else in the business, because I think that's an example of the business. I never ever want the fact that my family work in the business to be seen as nepotism or favourites and all that. So that's a very important part, is you need to sit back and say, is the role, are they exactly suited for the role, and are they performing? And, you know, that's a very important part, because you can really bring a business down if you don't have that. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And I can tell you that all of my family, we're all 100% focused on the ultimate achievement of our business goals.
Have you ever had a really serious conversation about potentially letting go of a family member?
No, I haven't had to, because thankfully they've all been 100% focused on achieving and exceeding the expectations of the business.
What was a time where a family member was right about something that you were completely wrong?
Oh, there's plenty of times. And you know, my approach, I mean, on that subject, and it doesn't matter really if it's family or it's, sometimes I'll be talking about an idea, some sort of view or whatever, and I'll get the statement, well, that's not right, and all that. And so I'll sort of, in a way, I'll listen, but I'll keep talking about the idea, but I'm listening, right? And then generally sometimes if I really let it absorb in my mind that they're right, then I'll come back and say, you know, you're right, all right? That's the approach. So look, there's plenty of times where I get told that my ideas are wrong. And you do have to listen. Every single bit of feedback, you have to listen. Sometimes you don't let it change your presentation, because generally sometimes your presentation's right and people just don't understand it, all right? Or they don't buy into it at that particular point. But you do need to listen to the feedback.
In your experience, how can a founder make sure that he's building an exceptional team that is capable of making over 9 figures in sales for a business?
The things that I've worked on is, one is I love to be able to share the overall direction, the bigger picture of the company, to as many people in the team as possible. Because I think if people get the information and not just their bit of the picture, then they're likely to sort of work out what their bit means to the overall goals. So sharing the whole picture with team members is very important. Clarity of objectives, and there's plenty of times where if objectives are vague or they're not clear, then you get the result you deserve, all right? So clarity of objectives, of how their piece fits into the overall business, is very important. And then it comes down to, you know, just making sure that you're finding people that have the right skills, or at least the right attitude to learn the skills. Because today's world, people don't necessarily need to have the skills for the role. They just need to be prepared to pick up the knowledge and learn and all that to be able to build the capability. And I think that's something that is very important in today's world, because it's a changing environment. There's a lot of stuff that you can pick up and learn and all that, but you've got to be prepared to learn. So it's more the attitude to me than necessarily the prescriptive experience and capabilities of people.
How many employees do you currently have across all your businesses?
Over 50.
Over 50 employees.
Yeah, 50, yeah.
What has been the best tactic to manage successfully over 50 employees?
As I say, sharing knowledge, right, in terms of where we want to go to as wider audience as possible. So don't just have your local management team that then hopefully shares the same message and so forth. Try and share and have as many conversations with as many people in the organisation about where you want to go and what you're doing has been, is something that I live and breathe by.
Now, you were an accountant.
Yeah.
What made you get into the comfort shoe industry?
I used to work for a company called Pacific Dunlop, which was based in Melbourne. And then there was a restructure, and that's, probably when I first moved into sales and to selling business software. And at the same time, I thought, okay, I'm going to take the opportunity to move from Melbourne to the Gold Coast, because Gold Coast, there's no better climate anywhere in the world. It's a beautiful place to live. So I did that. And then basically, so I was in sales for about 6 years in sales. And I did some really good work in that area, developed a lot of business in terms of that. There was a neighbour where I was living that had a particular interesting challenge in footwear. He was running a footwear business. It was a new, actually, orthotic and comfort shoe business. And they were selling into, pharmacy and athlete's foot. And there was an opportunity because they had a little bit of a problem with some of their financial systems. So, I thought, okay, it's an interesting opportunity. It's, I'm pretty flexible. So I took that on for about 12 months. And as I say, when you get into footwear, sometimes it engages you. And that's where I really learnt a lot of my grounding in footwear. And I was very fortunate that I was with a company that had a large network. So this company had access to, US and Europe, and they had a lot of knowledge in terms of the medical industry. And I spent some time with the founder of that company actually doing some road shows in Asia where we were teaching orthotics, and we were teaching footwear and what right shoes and wrong shoes and all that. So there was a lot of knowledge that I developed over that very short period of time. And then, opportunity came up to basically set up my own business, and it seemed to make sense. As I said to you, it was that move where, well, I have an opportunity maybe to create my own business. It's not so big a risk. I can do something, and if it doesn't work, then we'll find something else. And so I took on that opportunity, and bang, it just got into that sort of mode of the footwear and developing footwear and the things that make it different, and there we go.
What is the competitive advantage that you found on that market?
Our competitive advantage, and firstly, the industry that we operate in is very much comfort. What does that mean? It means about basically providing footwear that's got great fit, great cushioning, arch support. So really nice points of difference. It's not just, it's a shoe or footwear that's designed to be comfortable. Right. And so in terms of competitive advantage, one is that we were very fortunate. We started our business working with a large network of medical professionals. So we had, we deal with over 2,000 medical professionals in terms of podiatrists and physiotherapists. So we got a great insight into what makes comfortable shoes, what's important in terms of body alignment and all that. So that was one competitive advantage where we developed a lot of knowledge about, what makes a really good insole, what makes a good fit. And then, we took that knowledge and just built it into a lot of our designs. So that gave us the real knowledge base. And then obviously as we build forward in business, then you've got to add the things like trends, what makes a shoe attractive, what's important for particular categories and all that. But that's probably the biggest competitive advantage, is that knowledge in terms of the medical industry.
What's the biggest misconception founders have about their shoes?
I guess the biggest issue is size. If you really look at the shoes, someone who feels that they're a size 9 US or a 39 euro thinks they can fit the 39 or the size 9. Every shoe brand is different. That's the reality. So you might fit a Nike size 9, and you need an Adidas size 8, all right, or something like that. That's probably the biggest misconception is sizing in the footwear industry. And we spend a lot of time in terms of measuring and fitting and all that.
Because you have many different brands.
Yeah.
Even that happens within your brands?
Within our brands, yeah. I mean, the brands we manufacture, we try and use common lasts where we can, or we try and measure, have consistent last. Now, a last is like the foot shape that a shoe's built around, okay? So think of it as a wooden or plastic foot, and they build the upper around it. So we try and use as many of those to give us commonality. But even in our own shoes, some will be wider, some will be more narrower, some will be a little bit shorter, longer. You try and get as close as possible to consistency, but every shoe company, what they tend to do is they're trying to find a shape that fits the majority of the population. Well, that's all a little bit their interpretation of what the majority of the population is. And that's getting better, but that's generally how lasts are built.
Something that I found genius about your business is that you sell to the retailers, right? You sell to direct consumers, but you also work directly with podiatrists,
yes,
which are the people that essentially are recommending your product, yes, right, to the patients.
Exactly.
How did that come around?
That was where I was referring. We started there. So we were fortunate that we had access to a range of product that the podiatrists were prescribing. They call a customizable or modifiable insole, where they could heat mold, they could add bits to it, and it would be prescribed to the patient. So we were fortunate. So we started there. So we built a network of podiatrists there, and then the podiatrists start telling us the sort of footwear they wanted to recommend. Now, typically a podiatrist would recommend a patient to go to, say, the Athlete's Foot or their local footwear retailer and buy this particular shoe, like buy an athletic shoe or buy that. So we started to work with them about what they were recommending, right, and why and all that. So that's where we started to introduce footwear that ticked the boxes. Now, we then built the opportunity for podiatrists to have access to some of those products themselves, where they could prescribe it rather than necessarily. If they recommend a patient to go and get a pair of shoes, they really depend on what the patient finds with the retailer. And, there's a lot of great retailers out there. But whereas if a podiatrist can prescribe at least the first pair, then they're going to prescribe exactly what they want for the patient, which might be a shoe that takes a custom insole or whatever. So that's where we started. Now then, naturally though, as we start to build great shoes, then we start to sell to retailers directly, because, that's where most of the shoes are bought. Generally, a customer may be recommended a pair from the podiatrist, and then from then on, they're just going to buy the next pair from the retailer. So we moved very quickly into creating shoes and ranges that would sell to the retailers. And then our online business has been something that we've been very dedicated over the last sort of 8 years of growing, because obviously there's, up until COVID, probably 10% of consumers were buying footwear online. It seemed to be in COVID, it went straight up to 20%, and it stayed around 20% plus. So you have to have a very strong online business representing your brand as well.
That is genius, because you went exactly to the professionals that will tell you, hey, this is the kind of product that my patients need. This is exactly what I would be happy to recommend. You made it tailored to their recommendations and their needs and the patient's needs.
Exactly.
And then you get this professional that recommends your product, because you've been building relationships with them and making obviously a product that they will be happy to recommend, but also then you take it to the retailers.
Exactly.
And you have the access and opportunity for consumers to also buy directly from you and online. Yeah.
Exactly. And we often will get our retail partners who will say, look, why can the customer buy directly from the podiatrist? I want them to and we say it's the greatest form of marketing. If you've got a podiatrist recommending the shoes for the right reason, at least the first thing, then they're marketing the brand, and then you're going to get the benefits in terms of, the customer wanting to buy that brand going forward, or telling their family and friends. So it's a very strong, it gives that credibility.
Absolutely. You just said best. It's the credibility part, right? The professional just told me that this is the best fitting shoe for the problem that I have.
Exactly.
9 times out of 10, they're going to just follow their recommendation. They don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. And it's a very important part of our business, and for that reason. And, we'll have medical clinics that will have a very small sample set of shoes, So they've got a shoe that they can explain, and then they'll measure them up and they'll order it from us for that patient. That's typically the way that the medical clinics work.
How have you managed to continuously build relationships with the podiatrist?
So there's a lot of, firstly, we have a very strong network where we have, great database, we have great EDMs, great social, marketing and information flow. So we're continually sending out information and product ranges and so forth. We have a sales team that focuses on a number of the practitioners in terms of giving detailed product displays, particularly ones that have a more of a shop approach in their store, in their clinic. And then we attend most of the trade shows. So the podiatrist industry or the physiotherapy industry have trade shows where they pretty much do all their courses, their education courses, and suppliers will exhibit their wares. So we'll give them education during those trade shows where we'll set up a full stand and display our product there.
You started your business 15 years ago, right? Or more than 15 years ago now. How long did it take you to make your first million?
We had a bit of a business that we adopted then into the medical channel. So we had the first million of revenue. This is revenue, not profit, of course. Revenue in that we had access to about 1,000 podiatrists. So we just really quickly grew that business very quickly because there was a need in the market.
How long did it take you then to go from 1 million to 10 million plus?
It took me probably about 8 years, 7 years. Yeah, that was hard. Because the first bit was sort of a good base to work with, but then we had to start then adding products and developing our own products and then finding products that we could distribute. And so a lot of that. And then every new brand or every product, you have to really create the education, the demand and so forth. So around about 8 years to take it from to 10 million.
Hey, real quick, if you're a founder, CEO, or business owner looking to build a personal brand, become a thought leader in your space, and attract premium leads, our viral video podcast systems can help. Book a call with the link in the show notes to speak with my viral podcast team today. Now back to the episode. What made the biggest difference for you going from 7 to 8 figures?
In terms of getting there or in terms of the end result?
In terms of getting there.
I think in the first instance for me, I had a real big focus on diversification. A little bit contra to being focused in terms of creating lots of different opportunities. So whether it be having lots of different channels to market, sports market, retail, shoe shops, TV shopping, online, and then having multiple brands. So, having 3 brands, 4 brands, 5 brands. Diversification was a big driver in terms of growing quickly because it gave sort of the opportunity to pick up some new categories of business along the way with the same customers or whatever. So that was probably the biggest aspect in terms of our growth because I wanted to make sure we were diversified in terms of not being too dependent on one particular brand or channel.
Most businesses don't make it past the first year. Then the next batch will not make it past year 5. You have been in business for over 15 years. What has been the key for you to stay in business this long?
So again, that's a very good question. And I think back to probably the COVID shutdown as a good example to sort of draw on in that. Firstly, I have a really good commercial mind. As I go right back to the advantages of the accounting background, is that I can tell you now, if you don't know or have a business plan about where you're going to be in a year or 2 years, particularly from a cash flow point of view, you're going to struggle, right? You really need to know where your cash is going to be. And, profit and all that generally comes from that. So I, very much, I've always had a mind set towards understanding and knowledge of some sort of projection, right? Looking at the forward projection, looking at what we need to spend, where we need to spend it, right? Because for me, that's power. If I've got knowledge that it's all going to be okay there, then we can go forward. But if we're blind, we don't know what's going to happen around the corner, then it's a problem. So that's a real big thing for why I think kept going and growing, because there's obviously lots of ups and downs, right? The COVID shutdown was an incredibly difficult period because, as many businesses saw, I think I remember the date, early March, the first week of March or something, when when the Prime Minister said we're going to shut down for 6 months, or we're going to, and a little bit of time, and then you realise that's going to shut down a lot of retail stores. So you really have to start thinking about, well, what are you going to do to navigate that? Because no one's over your shoulder going to look after you. There's no, you're it. So that's where you need to plan out. You say, where's the cash coming from? You need to chop some costs where you can and plan that out. But at the same time during that, you can't save yourself to success. So we actually took the opportunity during that period to say, where can we get growth? So, we actually acquired a new business in the middle of that time that actually doubled our business because there was an opportunity. It was an opportunity, and we can, we worked out the way to financially manage it. And that was also a reason. If I hadn't have done that, it would have been a lot more difficult because we actually took the opportunity to say, how can we get growth to give us some further cushioning over this period? Again, knowledge, planning, business planning is critical because it gives you power and confidence.
Absolutely. That is such a good lesson as well for people, because these days, especially with how much the investing space in general has grown, where they tell people in general and businesses, don't keep cash, all these things. And that's true to an extent for a business owner, because you do need cash to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves, or for challenges when they arise as well, where you're going to need some cash to get you through the challenge or to power growth when needed and scale. Again,
my accounting has really helped background, but I do a forecast. I always evaluate, I put a little bit of conservatism into that. But what it does, it gives me, when I'm talking to my banks, I talk to them with knowledge and credibility. And as a founder, you need to be very credible with who's funding you, because it gives them confidence, right? And that's important. You can't be one of these guys or gals that comes in and says, here's the plan, and then a month later, it didn't go that way. It's half. So you need to find a way to be credible to where you're seeking your funding from. So I've been very concentrated on making sure that we're a reliable party for our banks as we go forward.
Speaking of accounting, you having an accountant background, do you still do your own taxes as a 9-figure entrepreneur?
No. I mean, my tax return is very uncomplicated. It generally is just press the button and it's up there. But no, we have an accounting company that checks over all of our tax returns.
That's one thing that I can't believe it took me so long to outsource. I feel like I was too late to that party. But also, now knowing what I know, I found that most accountants suck because they are not thinking business growth and what's possible for you as a business owner, and also preparing you to understand what you need to keep in mind, especially when you're doing your first company, your first trust, and all these things in order to save taxes, protect assets, and all these things. But I found that they underestimate things a lot. They play things too conservatively as well. They're not looking at from the eye of opportunity.
No, true. Absolutely, 100%. And that's where, when I moved from my sort of full-on accounting background, there's a couple of things and lessons along the way. The first one was that I always tell my team and myself, I operated on an 80% position, right? There's always 20% where you don't know, right? And a lot of accountants fall into the trap of having to be 99%. There has to be an element. It could be 80, 85, but there's an element where it isn't certain. Because if you don't have that, then you're not going to go forward. You're not going to grow. You're not going to take any risk or any business opportunity above whatever else takes, which means there's no opportunity. The other thing that I have learned along the way is that as an accountant, you tend to look at things as, we used to call a word widgets, which is the product, like sell one of those, sell 10 of those, X dollars, it's got these features. One of the things I've learned is that brand is everything. And as I've got, into my own business career, I realized there is nothing more important than building your brand, whether it be your product brand or your personal brand or your company brand. That's everything. You can have a slightly inferior product, but if you've got a great brand and a great story, you're going to win. And that took a long time. There was an original thing of saying that, well, we just create this, we get this at the lowest cost and we can sell this and away we go. It's not like that. And so that's a very important part. That's typically non-financial, that knowledge. There's a lot of cost that's needed to go in that sometimes people don't see the justification for.
Absolutely. You said it best. And by the way, this is what every single industry leader is using. You just have to go online to see that they're all putting massive amount of resources building their personal and business brand.
Yes.
Because they know that's the big play, especially with AI and all these 100%. New trends that are coming. Personal traits are going to stand out across all the AI garbage that we're being fed already. That it's nobody's going to stop it, right? So there's a lot of interesting things that are coming within the near future of human verified and making sure that this content was made by a human and not by a machine, and all these things that are going to be really interesting to see how this resonates with the markets, right? But you have been putting focus as well into building the business brand. Why did you decide as well to start a podcast, do content creation, and being online overall?
Yeah, well, I'll come to that question directly. Just to embellish and move into that, I actually had an interesting dialogue the other day with another footwear colleague in the footwear industry, and he was saying, everyone's doing pricing and promotion pricing and brands. It's the chase to the lowest price, and retailing and all that, and so there's. And the reality is, and I jumped into the conversation, said the reality is that is the way, unless you have something like a brand that gives another reason for a consumer to buy into it. It's all about the brand. Then the price is less important, right? So with that said, the lowest cost becomes, right, if you can make this, eventually you're going to get to the cost of the product.
It's a race to the bottom. It's a race to zero.
I recognised probably a couple of years ago that really, at the end of the day, we need to be rich in content. Content, we start with all the imagery and nice websites and all of that, and the catalogues and photo shoots and all that, and that's a great part of content. But at the end of the day, I realised that, and we're really at the beginning of the journey, we realised that we really need to create a brand. We need to create multiple sources of content, multiple sources of information that can communicate the company, the brand, the product. Right? So very much that's been a motivation for me over the last couple of years. Podcasts that we do, one of the motivations is about having a conversation on a particular part of our brand or our story, or with a colleague, with a brand partner, and then being able to use that to communicate that real conversation in a very digestible format, like clips and reels and so forth. So that's been a big part. But we're looking more for that now. We're looking for different ways to communicate, whether it be a more polished way where we do a full production, or whether we have just an informal discussion about a promotion that we're doing in the warehouse, or we have some retail stores stuff. At the end of the day, we need to be able to create volume content, right? The reality is that we see that this is, you said about change with AI and all that, and it's just a significant change in even the last 12 months. But obviously with the social marketing side of the things, you can have great content that gets read by a lot of people and you have very few followers. So the value in the content is becoming really important, because a lot of the channels now are presenting stuff based on customer desires or customer interests, rather than necessarily that they happen to like that brand originally. So this is really important, is that we need to be able to be continually testing and creating new brand identity through our content.
And this is so important, because what you just said is probably the single most important thing that every business should be working on right now, which is building their brand, being online, making sure that you're adapting to the new way of doing business, to building your authority so that you're a recognized and valuable industry leader.
Yes.
It's so easy for you to sell. Nike has no problem selling shoes to anyone at the price of whatever price they want because they have the power of the brand that they've been building for a very long time, right? And most people and businesses have found what you said as well, that sometimes can be difficult to, on paper, justify even the resources that need to be allocated to building brand because it's very difficult to see the direct ROI. Unless you're doing something like Facebook ads where, yeah, it's pretty clear, okay, we had this lead coming in, that person bought the product or whatever, right? But then even with ads, you have people that might come from an ad that don't buy until they consume the content.
Yes.
Your podcast, the imagery, the testimonials, case studies, whatever you have, and then they decide to buy. So it can be very difficult to have the attribution to it, but what is undeniable is if you have online content, you will sell more of your stuff.
Correct, 100%. You know, it's interesting, again, we'll talk about, this is real quick, 2 years, you know, it's happening really quick, this whole area. It used to be that you want to create a brand, a new brand, what do? You ring up a marketing agency and you give them a little bit of comments and say, come back to me with a brand story or a brand brief. And that's the old way. You know, when we set about, you know, the first thing we did was we actually sat down with our very small little group of, you know, team members from family, our social media, people in the business, sales, and we just started talking about what is our brand story. Some really basic research, again, to the point is what gives us our authority? What is our story, you know? If we wanted to write a book about it, what is the brand story of Global Foodcare or our individual brands? Now, the nice thing about that was it gave some real ownership of it, gave some real ownership from a wider group. So because it's an evolving thing, it's not a single point in time. Go to an agency, get a page, get a nice little folder, and then use that. It's an evolving thing. It should be your brand story. So that was the first step we did, and then basically, as you say, but it's not one idea of content. You have to be innovative. You have to have different perspective. You know, be able to deal with Facebook or TikTok, or you have to have lots of different angles and volume. Because there used to be you were happy with a couple of ideas and you just keep pushing them the same idea. That was marketing. Repeat. It's not like that now, is it? You've got to be multi-dimensional.
Absolutely. And you need to have omnipresence as well.
Yeah.
There has to be a clear strategy, which is one of the most common problems as well that we see, is that businesses start trying to build a brand, but there's no clear direction.
Yep.
And then they don't see the results, right? They go completely after the wrong thing. But as an example, one thing that we have done with your own strategy and your own podcast is we identify, okay, podiatrists are clearly very important to your business. It's a key piece of you guys scaling and getting to be known and building the authority. So what we did is bringing podiatrists onto the podcast.
Exactly.
So it's a way for them to build relationships, get content, just making sure as well that, hey, they even get the perception as well that is so important these days that, oh yeah, these guys are the best to work with. They're even, what a podcast, I haven't even heard of that on this industry, right? So it's one of those things where you have to truly think outside the box, but also what is going to best serve the mission that you have for the company and the goals that you have with building your brand.
Exactly. You're right. You have to have a North Star, and podiatrists are an important part for us, you know, in terms of explanation of our company. If I want to do an elevator pitch, is say we make products utilising our comfort recipe. That's what our North Star is. So, and that come all of our discussions. Our comfort recipe is good arch support, good fit, good cushioning. Yeah. It's pretty simple. Yeah. But then it creates your North Star. Then you just create lots of things that maybe leverage that or communicate that. The why, the how, the design.
Yeah. I'm curious, what would you say? Because there's still, it's crazy to me, but there are still businesses that are debating if they should make content online. What would you say to a founder, a business owner that is still not building a brand? Unless
you've got a business that's guaranteed your revenue. So if you can sit there and say to yourself, okay, nothing's going to happen. I'm locked in, secure. Maybe the ATO, the government tax department, they don't need
those
to build.
Guys are secure.
They're guaranteed. But, you know, unless you're there, then it's going to quickly move. Because the customers that bought your brand today from that shop, tomorrow they're going to be seeing a TikTok ad that's of their interest and it happens to relate to something else, and then you lost them. So, it's crazy. I mean, I think that it's not easy, but the nice thing about social marketing, because it's really all about digital marketing, that's really where it's at. The nice thing about it now is that anyone can do it. The barriers to entry are so much lower. It's about how innovative you want to be to create the content you want to be. And the other thing about it is that you've got it in you. There's a lot of, if you think about your team members, you can say, you can start to create opportunities for different team members that have different expertise to create a reel here or a feed there, and just make it part of your process that every month you need to be creating this. So it's sort of like an expectation of the business.
Absolutely. There's no excuse to not be online building a brand. The barrier to entry is as low as it has ever been. Of course, if you're a bigger business looking to be an industry leader, yes, look at what are the options by which you can instantly stand out and do things differently and approach things in a way that are going to directly help you as well with the goals that you have for scaling the business, for attracting top tier talent that want to be, guess what, with the winning team. Nobody wants to work with the guys that are on the client, right? So you better be adapting as quickly as possible. Find ways, if you can't really afford a team that can help you or a way that invest into it, try to utilize the team that you have accessible internally to just get you online, because chances are you're gonna learn how to do it better as well over time, hopefully, that eventually maybe you will get click on, oh, maybe this is what we need to do. Obviously, if you want to save all that time and effort, just hire someone that can help you implement everything, right? So you just have to be the face of the brand.
You certainly can do. And I think, look, having a process to create a podcast is very good. It's because it creates a regular reason to create content. Like that's been good for us. But I will say that any business, obviously opening up a social channel is no cost. So I think the key thing is that you don't have to be polished. LinkedIn is an important business element, because you can create LinkedIn content off your iPhone, and it should be real. It should be what your business is all about.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it'll improve, but it's about making a start. It's about doing something.
Yes.
Used to be again that, I need a social media manager or a department, and so you go and then, job done. I've got that covered. Well, that's not what it's at, because is it going to capture really what the essence of the business is?
Absolutely. And again, do something about it, because otherwise you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And right now it's riskier to not be online, to not be building a brand, than investing into figuring things out and getting you to build a social media presence, a personal brand, a business brand, and get in front of your dream customers. I'm curious to hear as well, because you have mentioned very specific skill that I found to be extremely important to be successful in business, which is sales.
Yeah.
What are some insights that you can share that have made you over 9 figures in sales?
Look, it's about sales is as an analytical job and a predictable job as accounting. That's number one. It's basically about number of calls, number of not out of stocks, having the right product, having a forecast, having the right number of customer service people responding to orders, order entry, shipping the product out on time. It's actually a total picture. Right, that's the most important thing. And in fact, that's one of the things that I bring to the company. I've always thought is that a company is not about its sales team. A company is about everyone, because everyone makes the sale. So I guess that's the answer is that you really need to sweat the detail and make sure every aspect of the company is working. Obviously, in terms of sales, you need to obviously make sure that you have the right product in the right place to be able to put yourself in position to get a sale. But that's what you do. That's what your strategy is all about. But I think where people fall down is they don't execute it that well.
Think of sales as well as you have your entire company that is the entire soccer team.
Yeah.
And sales is or the closer is the person that scores.
Yeah.
But before they can score,
Spot on.
they need the assistance from the entire
Exactly.
team. So that's marketing, that's operations, that's fulfillment,
100%.
that's testimonials, that's happy customers, that's the right founder and leadership team
Exactly.
as well. So all these things have to come in together so that then the sales is easy.
Exactly. And that's we in our company, we have a company-wide incentive program. If we achieve the numbers, then there's a incentive paid. And it's the same equivalent ratios across the whole company. There isn't a specific sales team program and for that reason.
What are the incentives you have put into place to get the buy-in from the team to help you build a 9-figure business?
It's very simple. It's our quarterly revenue. We just, at the end of the day, again, communication, share the revenue figures, how we're going. Are we up? Are we down? We obviously need to target growth because if you're not growing, then you're going backwards.
You're dying.
All right? You're dying. So we do that. It's a total picture, whether it be online, whether it be sales to shoe retailers. It doesn't matter. It's a total revenue. And then basically we share that. And if we achieve the target, then there's a percentage paid. And it just gives a sense. It gives that, I don't get into, we've got to have a particular mix of business or anything. It's just like, let's get the growth and revenue, right? Because that's really that creates an entrepreneurial spirit in the business.
What percentage do you share? Is it a percentage of the profit of the business? And is the distribution changing depending on leadership or roles?
It's a percentage of remuneration. So we do a percentage on the remuneration of everyone. So it's the same percentage based on their level of remuneration.
Okay, so it's based on their base salary.
Yeah, on the salaries, yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it. When it comes to team members, we spoke about you having as well your kids on the business.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned you have your wife on the business.
Yes.
How has it been having your wife helping you build a business?
Yes, it's been good. She loves the business. And what I've learned is I don't get in the way. That's the truth of the matter.
What do you mean by that?
So basically, I let Sandra do her thing with her areas of the business. She runs the customer services and the accounts receivable side of the business. So the worst thing I can do is necessarily question too many decisions. That is one of those ones where there's never a split between the personal side and the business. Yeah.
So with that particular one, it's different to the kids.
Yeah, the kids, they need to. No, but everyone in my team, my family, and all that, they're just 100% driving the business.
Has it ever got to a point where you guys almost have to make the decision of either split or get basically her out of the business? Not really, because at the end of the day, we see the value, we see the benefits of the business. So there's that level of maturity in the end at the end of the day. So there's never, and I think it's just what I said before is about having that sense of knowing that if there's no need to start interfering, micromanaging, then don't. So that's the way I get around it. I have contacts within your business, and I've been told you have never taken dividends from the company. Not in the last few years, because we've reinvested that, and thankfully we did that. It all changed, but we've reinvested, which allowed us to pay down our borrowings or invest in new brands. Every time we build new styles, we have to create significant factory tooling and all that. So that's been or acquire a brand, like we mentioned over the COVID, we acquired a footwear brand. So that's allowed us to do that. And if we had been paying out like some companies pay out over 50% or more as dividend, or even higher, because they see the profit, pay it a dividend, then maybe there'd be nothing in the bank when times are tough. So I think it's important in a business is to make sure that if you really are thinking about growth, then you leave plenty of stuff in the bank, per se, to be able to handle maybe a bit of a downtime. What's the biggest challenge you have ever had to overcome building a 9-figure business? Look, without a doubt, the biggest challenge is navigating the really cycles of the last few years with the
the COVID time. That's been a big challenge because, you have to be very clear about, your cash flow planning and all that. I mean, I guess that's everyone shared that challenge. Everyone knows that, and we all found our way to navigate through it. I guess we started with the discussion about the biggest challenges really at the end of the day is it's impingent on you to create a direction. And that's always a challenge, is to be thinking through where's the focus of the business that you're going to go with, because you've only got limited resource. You've only got limited time in the day yourself and your team and all that. So where do you put your focus and your emphasis and your sort of leadership directions? So creating the path forward is probably the biggest challenge, and taking good input into that. But at the end of the day, making a decision about the path forward.
And speed of implementation as well, right?
Yeah, speed of implementation. I mean, definitely we pride ourselves in being quite nimble, and that's because we have quite a flat structure. We don't have a large hierarchical structure in our business. We have quite a flat structure where we can be nimble. Like our product development cycle is amazing. We can go from concept to market in 3 months, which is amazing in footwear, something like that. So yeah, nimble is important. But again, just picking a strategy and then making a decision and then moving on is something that's probably the biggest challenge, but thing you have to do.
This next session is called This or That. So you just have to choose one or the other.
Okay.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Sushi or steak?
Steak.
Expert or jack of all trades?
Jack of all trades.
Product or service business?
Product.
CEO or founder?
CEO.
Instagram or TikTok?
TikTok.
Instagram or YouTube?
YouTube.
Photos or videos?
Videos.
Short form or long form content?
Short form.
Newsletters or podcasting?
Podcasting.
Organic or paid marketing?
Organic.
1 million followers with low conversions or 1,000 followers with huge ROI?
1,000.
Building A talent or hiring A talent?
Building.
A talent at a high price tag or multiple cheap C talent?
I'd say multiple A talent, but you got to have A talent, yeah.
Property investing or shares?
Property.
Property investing or crypto?
Property.
Property investing or buying businesses?
Buying businesses.
Building a business or buying a business?
Building.
Passion 6-figure business or stressful 8-figure business?
Stressful 8-figure.
Sales or marketing?
Marketing.
Can you expand why marketing?
Because brand is everything. Sales will come from having great branding.
And sales are very easy when you have a strong brand.
Correct. 100%.
Absolutely. You not only want to know people, you want to be known.
Yes.
That will pay way bigger dividends. What are the 3 most powerful questions that a founder can ask himself in order to build a 9-figure business?
Have I got the right people? Are you the right person as a founder to take the business to the next step? Have I got the right strategy? And have I got the right resources in terms of funding or people to achieve the strategy?
What's the biggest difference between a 7-figure and an 8-figure founder?
It comes down to being able to delegate more, entrusting with more people to do things in the business, to do their part of the strategy. A 7-figure, you can manage every part of the business and achieve the numbers or achieve the results. To go bigger, you really need to empower more people.
What's the biggest difference between an 8-figure and a 9-figure founder?
Probably access to more resources. Funding is probably the biggest one. One of the biggest issues is being able to fund growth. A 9-figure will tend to have access to more funding. So hence why often 9 figures comes from businesses that have had some private equity invested in them, because then the funding ceiling gets taken off a bit.
How old are you now, Jeff?
60.
What are 3 things you will tell a 30-year-old founder and entrepreneur to be able to build a 9-figure business as fast as possible?
So focus. Don't think you can work 8 to 5 and build a business that's going to be sustainable. Find your mentor pool or your advisory pool, which could be your team members, could be external members, that will give you some input. And then clearly define your path and make a decision to start moving down that path. Like, don't be ambiguous. Make a decision on a particular direction and then move down that path. It may not be the perfect direction, but at least it's a direction.
And you never have enough information to make the perfect decision.
No, never. If you do wait for the perfect information, you'll never do anything.
You will get killed by the guy that wasn't willing to wait. He just decided to act.
Exactly. And I think today, I mean, it's a corollary comment or supporting comment, but I think at the end of today, you can test, move forward, test, move forward. You don't have to everything perfect and then start. You can test. You can test digitally. You can do, and you know, at the end of the day, you should be able to quite quickly start making revenue, which gives you a clue that it's on the right path.
What has been the biggest win for you building a 9-figure business?
Probably the biggest satisfaction is being able to look at ideas that were literally, they weren't clear, they were ambiguous, and we define them, and then to see them grow into something that's a lot of consumers and customers understand. That's probably the biggest win. This people buying our product or a service and valuing it and starting to believe in what was an idea to begin with. That's probably the biggest win, the biggest satisfaction. The other big win for me is, as we alluded to before, is about the ability to add, to grow, to build, right? So whether it be adding a new brand or adding a business, to be able to consider adding that in and then growing and then making the business bigger. That's so satisfying.
What's the worst business advice you have ever received?
It's tough because I don't listen to the bad. I think the worst is where someone tends to say you've got to be very focused on one thing. I think, yes, you don't want to be focused on 100 things, but I think you need a portfolio. You do need a variety because not everything's going to win. And I think probably the worst is where it's such a narrow focus where you got to focus on that product and make that product win and win and win. If it doesn't win, then you got nothing else in you ready to go.
And when you say as well diversification, in this case you mean as well within the same industry.
I do mean within the industry. Like you don't want to. You certainly need to focus where you can leverage the business. So diversification where you can leverage the skills of the business and the knowledge. So within the same industry, I'm referring to that. But look, at the end of the day, we also as we start to build a digital capability that could be in other industries. We start to build a logistics capability. So, who's to say that we can't be operating in other industries? We've chosen to diversify around our industry in terms of different retail or different channels of market, different product brands, different countries. We've got an operation in Singapore and in New Zealand and here, and the US. We've got an operation now that's we've got 200 retailers that are buying our product in the US. We'll have an online business, and we're even starting to look at the Dubai market, mainly because it's a way of entering the Middle East.
And what's the best piece of business advice you have ever received?
The best piece of business advice, I think the business plan. I think it always comes down. Look, for me, forward knowledge, where you've got all the levers in place and you know exactly what it means, is power. That gives you so much confidence. So the best business advice is have a good plan. Have a well-constructed forecast around your cash plan, because that will give you all the confidence to be able to do the things that you need to do.
What's the minimum that a business plan should have in order to be successful?
It can be on one page. look, you need to know where you, what your product, your service or product is. You need to know what your sales projection is. Off that, you need to know what your expense or cost projection is. Obviously, you need to know the level of stock you're going to carry or the level of AR. That's from that, you can work out your cash flow and your profit. And then I would recommend always that you split into months, because you can look rosy for an annual result, but in between that you could have had a whole lot of hurt that you didn't count on, because it can go up like that. So I think I tend to look at a monthly projection and out 12 to 24 months, and keep it simple. A 20-page business plan is way too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Jeff, before we close in, I have a little something for you to say thank you for coming on the podcast, and also to say thank you for the incredible partnership. It has been an absolute pleasure helping you build your brand, working together, and to celebrate the wins so far, and looking forward to continue to help you build your brand.
Thank you so much. It's been an enjoyable night, conversation, and I really have enjoyed the business partnership that we've had so far. We've learned a lot. I tell you, the experience with your organisation has really taught us a lot, and also pushed us out of our comfort zone a bit. A lot of the stuff I've talked about, content, has come from the experience and then relating it to other opportunities that we can have. So thank you very much.
See what it is.
Okay.
Let's see if you can see what it. Let's see if you know what it is.
Diplomato.
This is Venezuelan premium rum.
Wow.
We had some good celebrations at the end of last year.
This is amazing.
And I was like, I need to get this, man.
This is a bottle that you don't open.
This is premium Venezuelan rum.
I tell you who'll be very jealous of this is Ben.
I'm happy for you to share as much as you want with Ben.
This is thank you so much.
That's my pleasure.
Very cool. All right.
Jeff, with that being said, where can people find you online, your business, get in touch with you, buy the best comfort shoes in the game?
Our multi-brand, or our company name to consumers, is the Comfort Co. And we have all of our brands on that site, including Revere, Vionic, Shoal Footwear, Mia Vita and Vitasol, our new brands, and we have a number of other brands. You can also find those brands on their own individual websites. So we have a Vionic Shoes website, we have a Shoal Footwear website, Revere Shoes, Mia Vita. So we have, in total, we probably have around 20 different websites for the company across different countries. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook under the Comfort Co. We look forward to, and also LinkedIn as well. We have a Comfort Co LinkedIn, and of course my own LinkedIn handle is Jeff Coombridge.
Excellent.
Please feel free to reach out and let's have a conversation.
As usual, all the links will be down below, so feel free to go and support Jeff. If you want to support us, all the links are down there. If you enjoyed this episode, if you found it valuable, all I ask from you is that you share it with another founder. My goal is to help as many of you as possible to save all the pain, all the money, all the time, so you can build a better business that you also don't grow to hate. I will see you on the next episode. Good vibes for everyone. Hey legends, my goal with Founders Playbook is to help 1 million entrepreneurs build successful personal brands and businesses so that they can increase their impact and profits. You can support the mission by simply sharing the podcast with other founders and entrepreneurs. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on social media. Let's get to work.